Please, tell me everything's working. Come on. Almost everything's working. cannot hear myself. But I think I know why that is. There we go. All right. I see that people have shown up. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. I know I've been gone for weeks. I'm so sorry. Hello world. I've missed you. I've missed streaming for you. And I'm borrowing Lo-Fi Girl at the moment specifically because I didn't have so many things set up right now. There's a lot that's still broken, a lot that's still messed up. But enough of me is working that I can do a little watch alone stream. I mean, like, I've been afraid of these things. Hello, Repcam, and thank you, by the way, for the subscription. It's so wonderful to see you here. It's so wonderful to see everyone here. I'm surprised people are showing up, but super appreciative. Let me make sure that I can see the Twitter chat as well. Glad to be back online. I've mostly been on Twitter. Actually, I'm gonna show you guys. I've been actually setting up my own alternative to Discord because I hate Discord with a fiery passion. Here we go, and show our Orleans history, the Matrix. This is Matrix, which is a chat protocol inspired by IRK with end-to-end encryption, and has a lot of Discord's features these days. Right now, I'm just using their main server, but it's really cool. It's what I would prefer to use over Discord, just because it makes everything easier. I can set it up on a private server of my own, and have my own actual private, a community server instead of Discord owning that. Oh, you do, Repcam? Add me. Oh, add me on here. Eliza, VT at matrix.org. Something is seriously wrong. I am generating tokens a lot slower than I should, so I apologize if I'm a little slow today. Let me scoot you guys up so you can be seen. There you go, Repcam. Anyway, so I have a channel on this server. It's #project Eliza. /matrix.org. So if you want to come into my public room, that's what I've got going on there. And for today, you're just kind of viewing my desktop. I'm surprised it's going as well as it is. But we are going to We're going to watch the JFK files that wendigoon made. I know I did a thing on Twitter where I was going through as I was reading them. And I bet that he's going to come to a lot of the same conclusions I did. And I'm going to try and fill in gap. That's... There you go, Repcam. I have dropped them in chat for you. Anyway, we're gonna watch this because one, I love wendigoon videos so. And I just want to spend some time with you guys with low stress.
Now, I'm not saying they definitely did
Two
it.
subtitles provided by the Thor. Intercellenary. And only inherit and how, and to cells. And I care learn. Oh, we got a little bit of hallucination. I apologize, guys. So, I love this guy's videos, but I also think this is a subject specifically that I can help you guys figure out how to dig deeper into it, where to look, ways that you can understand the jargon. I want to help with
Just
that.
saying,
I want to go
I
through
have some
stuff like that with
questions.
you guys.
As many of you probably know, over the past couple of weeks, the entirety of the JFK files have been released. In 1992, Bush signed the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act, which is an effort to amass and publicize all documents related to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. However,
Please, let me know if the volume is okay.
because of things like the Church Committee or the House Select Committee on Assassinations or the Warren Commission, when JFK's assassination was being investigated, they didn't just investigate FBI and CIA matters as they relate to him, they investigated everything federal agencies were doing at the time, which...
Okay, so this I find really interesting. When I was going through the CIA files that were released, under the JFK files rather, I was really impressed. Okay. It was really fun to take the time. Want to start fresh. To take no assumptions about the problem, about the story and just read what was in front of me. And by reading what was in front of me, it was more amazing than I could imagine. Because we are getting raw information, intel data. Like, these are the things that people wrote as part of their reports in a secret intelligence document. Okay. Whoever they were studying. It might not have been what's his name? It might not have been Lee Harvey Oswald's. It might have been someone making comments about the agent who was talking to Oswald. It might have been an entire report about a, Cuban agency or a Cuban pub and anti-communist group. It's amazing just how far from the CIA the available information gets. Just how far from JFK it gets.
Which means that the JFK files, while yes containing
let him
information
talk.
about JFK,
Sorry.
also contain information about spies in foreign countries or meddling with foreign elections or spying on American citizens. When Bush signed the act in 1992, it said that 25 years from that date, all of the information relating to JFK and the JFK files was to be released to the public. Because of that, 25 years later in 2017, several of the documents were released, but they were heavily redacted. And some of the records were outright held from the public. And between 2017 and now, a few files were released. But in January, Trump signed Executive Order 14176, which ordered all documents to be released and unredacted. And over the past couple weeks, this new release...
That was like Christmas for me. Beataboo. I was so excited that when they released these things, they released all of them again, unredacted. There was no games being played. It was just all of the information. Or if it wasn't all of the information. It was so much that it didn't matter that they didn't give us one shot, one smoking gun. Because they gave us everything else. Even if they kept the cherry for themselves, they gave us the sundae, they gave us the whipped cream, and they gave us the sprinkles. That's absolutely amazing to me. Let's see.
Has resulted in over 60,000 pages and over 3,000 new documents. And while I understand that's a lot to dig through, I have far too much time on my hands and decided to do that for you.
Thank you, good sir. Remember, if you're listening out there, please give Wendigoon a follow or a subscribe on YouTube. Or whatever it is that people do when they love someone on the internet. This man has done such great deep dive content and remained above the bullshit. So he deserves your support far more than I do, guys.
I know the question on everyone's mind, is there actually anything in there? What do the JFK files tell us? And I will be upfront with you right now. I am blown away that they actually release this stuff. Sure, there's no piece of paper.
That pisses me off. I don't like that. He just said he was going to be upfront with us. But, him being blown away isn't upfront. It's burying the lead. It's not that I don't agree with him. I was equally blown away. I spent more time researching Cuban underground groups than JFK or Oswald's. I've learned more about the nuclear proliferation in secret. For countries like Israel and South Africa, than I ever wanted to learn. The stuff that this data extends to, one, is so massive. It's absolutely consuming. But it doesn't answer the question, who killed Kennedy? It just answers the question. Who's conspiring to kill Kennedy? So, yeah, that's the problem. By the way, I do have, sponsor block and ad block on. So we won't be getting ads, we won't be seeing sponsor videos. I do recommend. Okay, well fuck it. I'm gonna actually, for this video, I'm going to watch
off as crazy conspiracy theorists for saying a couple decades ago.
Let's do that.
New information about Lee Harvey Oswald, fights that were happening between the FBI and the CIA behind the scenes. The CIA setting up fake companies in order to get logistical benefits. These files give us so many new pieces of the puzzle, and I'm excited to talk about them. We are going to... So if that sounds interesting to you, then stick around after the ad as we get into the newly released JFK files. I should also mention that the sponsor for this video knew exactly what I was going to be doing in this video, and they said that was fine. So that's really cool of them, I think. And that sponsor is, of course, AG1. AG1 is your drinkable scoop of vitamins, minerals, probiotics, and whole food sourced ingredients in one easy drink. Healthy habits can be hard to maintain, so typically the easier it is, the better it is. And it's hard to get easier than AG1 because it's just 8 to 12 ounces of water and a spoonful of AG1 and you're good to go. So instead of being a bunch of pills and supplements you have to take every day, it's your dose of vitamins and minerals, pre and probiotics, and superfoods in one easy drink. And because of its ingredients, AG1 just has a naturally sweet flavor that's enjoyable along with your morning coffee. It is incredible what giving your body the things that your body needs does for your overall mood. A lot of you have probably noticed that I've lost weight over the last several months, and AG1 has certainly been a part of that. Now, to clarify, I'm not saying that I drank AG1 and immediately lost weight, but the natural energy and generally feeling better throughout the day made me want to do things like get up earlier to work out or go run or not get a second helping every time I eat. From your mood to your energy to immune support to gut health, AG1 has got you covered. If you want to get in on this fantastic product and friend of the show, then there's never been a better time to get in on this offer. That's because right now, if you head to my link in the description at drinkag1.com/wendigoon or scan the QR code, you will get $20 off your first subscription to AG1. That is right, $20 off. And in their welcome kit, you'll get things like a 30-day supply of AG1, 5 free travel packs, a shaker bottle, metal canister, metal scoop, and a bottle of AG vitamin D3 and K2. Again, that's drinkag1.com/wendigoon or the link in the description or the QR code to get in on this incredible offer today. Thank you all for watching the ad. Thank you to AG1 for sponsoring the channel. As always, it means the most. Check them out, the link in the description, and we are back to the video. We are going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. So
Thank you for making it.
First thing I want to get out of the way is there is a lot here, and I promise I have done my best. 60,000 pages is a lot, and it got into several moments where I was just reading stuff I had no idea what it concerned. Because a lot of these documents are out of order and just put together in one report. So it may be mentioning names or dates that mean nothing to me that in reality I would need 10 other documents across the CIA records to figure out what it's talking about. So I used a combination of documents that I found to be the most interesting or pertinent, as well as several people online who were talking about interesting things that they found, and then figuring out what file they were talking about, then finding that original file, then figuring out how that connected to the whole. In other words,
all right. So I don't know if you understood what he just said. But he was just talking about how the only way that you can understand these documents is if you can cross-reference them both with other documents in the release documents, and documents that have been released in separate releases for different reasons.
Let's let this video serve as bullet points for interesting things.
Let me show you. Let me show you what I mean. We are going to go to the Zobachi the Mary CIA to do what we can do. Where is it? Mary McCarthy. There it is, Mary Farrell. All right, so Mary Farrell Foundation put a ton of work into decrypting cryptonyms. Finding references to terms here. Let me find one that we'll definitely be seeing. Let's do it this way then. Simic V wastes. Oh, JM wave. Where is Mary Farrell? There we go. So we come down here to look at JM wave. JM wave is an acronym that we're going to be coming across a lot, and this is a really good example. JM wave is a CIA station in Miami training facility for anti-Cuban operations, existing on what is now the site of the Miami Zoo. They also have references to it from the church committee books. From the reference documents. All of these references are to places that we know about JM wave. So we're going to be going through this and going deep into the details as wendigoon goes wide and takes us through different documents. And we are also going to accept this friendship because I just noticed that
in the
Anyway,
files,
here we
but
go.
someone who is far more educated than I can come along and do a much better job connecting a lot of the threads. And this should really be viewed as a starting point for people who are looking to dive into this mess.
Yes? That's really important to take into consideration. He is not doing the full deep dive. He is giving us the tip of the iceberg, because he doesn't do iceberg videos anymore. He's above that. Being dramatic. My dogs are being dramatic. Sorry, give me just a second. Oh, I might have to invite you, Repcam. Give me just a second. There we go. The room is not public yet. I'm just trying to get things set up still.
And in the spirit of that, all of the records are housed at the National Archives website. So for all of the excerpts I'm reading, I'm going to display on screen the National Archives database number for that document.
I will do my best when I need to bring up that document for us as well. Because if we have that number on screen, we can just type in 104, 1004. We can narrow it down really quickly to the document that he's looking at, and look at the whole thing for ourselves. Except that then, the text on my chat box looks like crap. 1 second. Don't do that. Come on, let me resize you. Properties. Can I pick the alpha? Yes. There we go. That'll make chat more visible. Anyway. With me switching around, I want to make sure you guys just chat messages. Repcam, yes, a few people have set up RAG databases for this. They're not publicly accessible, but they've demonstrated the code is all on GitHub, so you can rebuild it yourself. Remind me of that after we watch the video.
So if you want to read more about something or learn the context of something I'm talking about, you can just type it in and see it for yourself. So after wasting enough of your time, let's get into some of the information that I find interesting, starting with the thing everyone's wanting to know about, Oswald. So the main question surrounding Lee Harvey Oswald is, was he acting alone? Because a lot of his movements, especially right before the assassination, seem pretty suspicious. I mean, if he was a supposed madman with a rifle, what's with him traveling to Cuba and Mexico and trying to get back into Russia? And throughout the assassination investigations, the CIA denied any hard knowledge of what Oswald supposedly did in Mexico or Cuba or what his travels were before the assassination. They had briefly mentioned that Oswald was a person of interest, but they never examined him too closely. Well, as we know now, that was a lie. In this CIA letter, we see a report on someone named Valery Kostakov, who worked at the Soviet embassy in Mexico City.
Okay, this is one of the documents that I found early on, too, and I was really fascinated by it. I don't know if you guys have noticed that I've been a little bit obsessed with the idea that every person that Lee Harvey Oswald spoke to, between or in the year he killed the president, he was talking to either a CIA agent or a KGB agent. No normal people. His wife. Every person at an embassy. She just like every person at an airport, he just keeps running into CIA agency. There's no one but CIA agents and KGB agents and Cubans in his life. Wow. Anyway,
Specifically, it
let's
says,
let him talk
in
about this
September
one,
or
because I
October
love,
of
this is a really good
1963,
place to start
Lee Harvey
everything off.
Oswald approached the Soviet embassy in Mexico City in an attempt to get a visa allowing him to return to the USSR. Kostikov, as a consular officer, handled this visa request. We have no information which indicates any relationship between these individuals other than for the purpose of Oswald's making his visa request. This raises an interesting question. If the narrative around Oswald is to be believed and he was simply acting alone, why was he trying to get back into the USSR a month before he shot the president? Also, while the document says it doesn't seem that Kostikov knew Oswald outside of this event, that Kostikov was just the agent Oswald so happened to talk to, they go on later into the report to kind of dog the guy a little bit when they say, while in Mexico, he was considered by some to be the most effective and dangerous of intelligence officers in Mexico.
So, I didn't have the same takeaway as wendigoon here about this. I didn't think that they were dogging this guy, Kostikov. I think that they were speaking him up. I think that they were giving him story. Because as you read these documents, you're going to find that every person is putting their narrative, okay, into the story, their interpretation. And they're taking as much information as they can muster to support that position. It's really obvious if you've been listening to the news in the last 10 years what propaganda is. But to these people, they were all new tools, new ways of discussing intelligence. And they do it without abandon. They talk up to each other so that there is a way to understand the intelligence right there in the documents.
He has been described as being without morals, education, and manners. Shortly after his arrival in Mexico in 1968, he was arrested in front of a house of prostitution after becoming involved in a fistfight with some locals. Also, to clarify the timeline, in other parts of the report, it says that he arrived in Mexico in 1961, left in 1963, and then returned in 1968. So that's why it said shortly after arriving. There's also a ton of other leads concerning Oswald that were investigated and are now public. Like, for example, there's a letter from a guy named Sergei Kazornono. And in a letter that he
This one is insane, guys. Guys, you don't even know. This is nuts. Even if you take it at its most mundane interpretation, a drunk, disgraced Eastern European man trying to gain favor from Western spies by giving this information, it's still insane. I'm just going to read you the whole thing if I can. On July 18, 1963, I was in London, England at the airport's immigration officer number 175. I had no visa. Immigration placed me under house arrest. Mr. Smith in police uniform, Secret Service, brought me steak dinner, and police officer interrogated me. He asked what the embassy of USSR say. What Did you heard in Vienna, Austria? I said I have heard that one American defector, Mr. Lee Harvey Oswald, to Russia, and he returned to United States of America. This man he preparing to kill, to assassinate the President, John F. Kennedy. Mr. Smith, police officer, asked me, do you know his name? I said his name starts on O. His name was published one time in newspaper in Washington Post. Mr. Smith, police officer, said, easy to find. It's really hard to trust this kind of intelligence. I'm being super fair here to the CIA, mind you, but also, this, coupled with the document previously shown, really puts into question that they weren't acting on this information because it was bad intel, but because it was good intel.
Wrote on March
Anyway,
15th of
let's
1978 to the
let
British
wendigoon get into it.
Embassy. He says, on July 18th, 1963, I was in London, England at the airport immigration office number 175. I had no visa immigration, placed me under house arrest. Mr. Smith in police uniform, Secret Service, brought me steak dinner and police officer interrogated me. He asked me what the embassy of USSR say. What did you heard in Vienna, Austria? I said I have heard that one American defector, Mr. Lee Harvey Oswald, to Russia, and he returned to United States of America. This man, he preparing to kill, to assassinate President John F. Kennedy. Now, the reason for the grammar being the way that it is because this guy's Russian, so English is a second language. And he goes on through the rest of the letter to say that he was also told that Martin Luther King Jr. would be killed and that the person that is supposed to kill him, James Earl Ray, is in prison at that time.
That's the other really creepy thing about this. He calls out, like, when I read James Earl Ray the first time in this document, the copy of it to the Russian ambassador, I was absolutely blown away. I was like, wait a second, did this get mixed up from the MLK documents? And then I started going through it again. I'm like, no, wait, what am I talking about? He's talking about Lee Harvey Oswald and James Earl Ray in the exact same paragraph. He's talking about Dr. Martin Luther King. This is absolutely mind-blowing to me. It'd be one thing if he said, oh, somebody's going to assassinate the president, and he didn't give any names. But no, this guy said, someone's going to assassinate the president. His name starts with an O. Yeah, that guy, Lee Harvey Oswald. And also, someone's going to assassinate MLK. And his name is the car, James Earl Ray. That is a lot, harder to argue against.
He also then says that he offered to take the truth drug to tell the truth and that he was tortured with mind drugs. And all of that information could be really cool or effective if it wasn't written a decade after all those things happened. If you want to know.
Right, that's the part I forgot. The date on that is wrong. Let's go back because I'm an idiot. Let me look at that. "1978. Yeah, I'm sorry guys. I'm an idiot. But the information was originally from July 18th, 1963. It just didn't even get considered until 15 years later. Thank you for
Kennedy.
lurking, Repcam. Thank you for lurking and keeping the stream going. You
if
guys
it
are
wasn't
the
written
best.
a decade after all those things happened. If you want to know how 60,000 pages got released, it's because the majority of them are that. A lot of this information has been redacted or kept out of the public's eye up until this point because it includes individuals who like no wrongdoing was found, or private information like addresses or social security numbers. Things that, by the way, are all public now. Like any one of these people, if they were still alive, you could just drive to their house. But for every bit of good data, you have to wade through tenfold of the bad, which I guess is how the real investigation probably went. What's funny is this guy got a letter back that was pretty much just like, wow, that sucks. Anyway, also a ton of the
Oh, I didn't see that one. Oh, wait. Let's read this. 104. 112. 135. This is the action info copy of a communication received from MI5 in Washington. So here's the original letter. Here's the copy and the transcription. I never looked at this page. That's my fault. This is to acknowledge the receipt of your letter regarding difficulties you have encountered with the police and the FBI. In the event there is legal action taken by the police or the FBI to institutionalize you, this office will provide you with legal representation. If you have any further legal problems, please contact this office. In other words, what they were saying was, cry. Literally, just said K.
pretty much just like, wow, that sucks. Anyway, also a ton of the files are just things like this, effectively paperwork. Like this document is the Australian CIA messaging the American CIA to ask if America could withhold some of the information regarding Australia whenever this information goes public. There are
That always bothered me as I was going through it. Australia's ACO kept coming up. And every time it was just make sure that we're not in the documentation, which makes me think that Australian involvement has already been destroyed. And I would really love it if the Australians actually had some interesting spy story to tell. That would be fascinating.
no joke, several files in here that are just the piece of paper that says the file is being moved somewhere else. But again, if it was related to the JFK files, it got released. Now, this document related to Oswald raises an actually interesting point. It says that in 1991, a United States professor named E.B. Smith had several conversations with a man named Nakhonov. Nakhonov is deputy to the KGB director. The KGB is effectively Russia's CIA. In this internal CIA communication, which, by the way, not to be lame, but seeing words like temporary working copy, destroy after use, and secret on something you're reading feels kind of cool.
He's not wrong about that. It always feels good to see the words temporary, working copy, destroy after use, and secret. And those things aren't happening. Because it's no longer a secret. It's permanent, and we can see it.
According to this internal CIA communication, Smith said in section 5, quote, Nakhonov's first assignment from Bakhtin, he's the director of the KGB, was making arrangements for the KGB-CIA liaison relationship, which has now come into being, which that sentence alone opens a whole can of worms. But anyway, in preparation for one possible question which might be raised, Nakonov personally reviewed KGB files to determine if Lee Harvey Oswald had been a KGB agent. He reviewed 5 thick volumes of files on Oswald. Nakonov is now confident that Oswald was at no time an agent controlled by the KGB. From the description of Oswald in the files, he doubted that anyone could control Oswald, but noted that the KGB watched him closely and constantly while he was in the USSR. He commented that Oswald had a stormy relationship with his Soviet wife, who rode him incessantly. The file also reflected that Oswald was a poor shot when he tried target firing in the USSR. Now, while E.B. Smith can be assumed to be reliable, considering he is an American professor that taught for a while in Moscow and is willing to give information about Moscow to the CIA, that doesn't mean that Nakonov had to tell him the truth. But some of the little details that Nakonov mentions indicates that
I'm so glad that he said that. It can be really like, even I just did it, right? I just made the mistake of getting overexcited about a piece of information. And then forgetting that it was only available to semi to the public, or at least to the intelligence community, 15 years after it was written. And every one of these people is lying to each other. Even people on the same side are lying to each other because they have an agenda. So when a CIA agent is talking through a liaison to a KGB agent, which is exactly what this document's about, you have to assume that they are not giving you the best information. But you do have to assume that the spy, who's writing this up, is trying to give you the best information they have. And that distinction is really important. It's subtle, but it's important.
he probably was, that Nakonov was interested enough to see if his agency had hired or enlisted Oswald to kill the United States president. The mention that the KGB was watching Oswald while he was in the USSR also makes sense, because he was an American Marine that defected to Russia and then left Russia to come back to the United States. So I'm sure they had their suspicions about him, just as the CIA had their suspicions about him, but we'll get to that. The mention that the details of the file indicate Oswald would be hard to control makes sense, considering he kind of seemed to be erratic, at least through a lot of the stories we know about him now. And of course, the mention of being a poor shot is kind of telling. Not long ago, I visited Dallas and went to the location of the shooting, and I do have to admit it's not that hard of a shot, but to
I'm so sorry, lossless ping. I did not even notice your resubscribe. I missed it. I'm so sorry. Wait, why can't I see you? Oh my goodness. I'm sorry my chats are messed up. Let me fix my chat, guys. I'm so sorry. Here we go. But yes, thank you for the resubscription. You honor me so much. Thank you.
to hypothetically fire 3 shots that quickly at a moving target required some degree of marksmanship. Also, for the record, the last time I talked about the JFK assassination to this degree was in one of the earliest videos on the channel. I proved the JFK conspiracy with a whiteboard, and I'm glad that you guys liked that video and it grew the channel. That means a lot. But to be honest, my standards for research then are nothing compared to what they are now. I've changed a lot of my opinions regarding the case and a lot of the logistics of it. I do think now firmly that Oswald was a shooter. My question is, was he the only shooter? And if he was a trigger man, who was he pulling that trigger on the behalf of? Was it
Alright, so now we're going to get into the place where I am a total conspiracy nut. And I'm insane. I don't think Oswald pulled the trigger that day. I think there was someone in the building across from Oswald. And I think there was someone on the grassy knoll. I think Oswald was supposed to pull the trigger sooner than he did. I think the only reason that Kennedy didn't die on the turn is because Oswald didn't pull the trigger and tried to get out of there without pulling the trigger. I'm not saying he wasn't involved, but I am saying that I don't think that Oswald actually took a shot. Or if he took a shot, that he took that shot at the president. Too many weird things, right? There's the misfire. There's some bullet, I don't know which gun it came from, that fractures, shoots up, and hits someone under the bridge, like 60 yards ahead of the car. If Oswald let out any bullets, I think it was the one that missed. I think he got scared. And I think that's why he's dead. That's why he got shot by Jack Ruby. But that's just my opinion. I believe that there were supposed to be 3 shooters, and it was supposed to be a turkey shoot.
Himself or something else. So I don't read this last sentence saying that Oswald was a poor shot to mean Oswald wasn't a shooter. I read that to mean either himself or someone else invested to get him better. There's other things in the files that relate to Oswald and the JFK assassination, but you're going to need more context from other things mentioned in the files for them to make sense at this point. So we'll come back to that later. For now, I want to talk about some other things that came out of these files. Because to be completely honest, the wildest, craziest things that we have found out now have nothing to do with the assassination. See, when these assassination committees were doing their investigations into the CIA and the FBI, they wanted all of the information that related to agents who were involved in the assassination investigations, and they wanted all information regarding what the CIA was doing around the time. So that blew the lid on a ton of weird information. Now, again, the stuff that I am talking about today is the things that have come out over the last 2 weeks. But in the JFK files that started to get released in 2017, that's where we got information that a CIA agent had claimed to see Hitler in South America in the 50s, meaning that Hitler survived World War II. Or information.
That document, by the way, was the CIA acknowledgement of something that came out. In the mid-80s, I think it was, or early 80s, but there were people who were saying that Hitler lived somewhere either in Chile or Argentina. And that the German Wargel for the expatriate PS are in Germany and Argentina who are protecting his privacy. Excuse me, Chile and Argentina. It's still quite unknown what's actually going on there. I personally think most of them are just very mundane. Like Andy. It makes sense that after the war you'd want to get as far away from Europe as possible, while still maintaining your base culture. I'm not saying whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, it's just a thing.
About the CIA hiring women to sleep with diplomats of other countries in order to gain their favor and feed them information. So many weird shadow tactics have been revealed because of the JFK files as a whole, but again, we're just talking about the things that have come out over the last couple of weeks. I had to put a lid on this video somewhere. If I have to look at one more memo, I'm going to scream. So some of the most interesting information that's come out over the past couple weeks is everything related to Cuba. See, the committees wanted information about what the CIA was doing, and in the early 1960s, the CIA's main concern was Cuba. From the Bay of Pigs invasion to the Cuban Missile Crisis, the CIA was trying to find a way to get Castro out of power and to cripple the economy of Cuba so that they were no longer a threat. We know from declassified documents like Operation Mongoose that the CIA was trying to kill Castro and even attempted on a couple occasions. So while we already know that they did hate Cuba, now we know a lot of the ways how they hated Cuba. In this CIA document, which, by the way,
this document is the one that I think really needs extra digging in. From here on out, we're going to be digging in a little bit deeper. I kind of skimmed through and watched different sections just to make sure that this would be a good video to share. And this is the paper that I was thinking about. God, that makes no sense if you don't know CIA cryptonyms.
way you can tell who's actually making the document you're reading is by the prefix on the record number. So if it starts with a 104, it's CIA. If it starts with a 144, that's the NSA. If it starts with a 198, that's the Army, etc. Because sometimes the agencies will be speaking to each other, or it'll be a clandestine operation, so everyone's kind of talking at once. But to know who actually maintained the record, which matters, just look at the prefix for the record. But anyway, as a lighter note, before we get into the depressing stuff, this CIA informant, while describing things that happened in Cuba in point 10, says, L1 talked about assassination of President John F. Kennedy, L1 being the informant. According to L1, in 1969, L1 personally saw Fidel Castro receive a group of U.S. radicals. Castro talked to them for 2 hours about why just one assassin could not possibly have killed Kennedy. Castro ordered a reenactment of the crime using his best marksman, and they could not duplicate what Lee Harvey Oswald supposedly did by himself. L1 said that 3 groups were involved in killing the president. 1 group of Cubans, 1 group of mafiosos, and a 3rd group of mercenaries. The 3rd group included a man with a Greek name. For one, Castro saying that one of the groups was a group of Cubans doesn't explicitly mean that Castro was involved with the assassination, because there were a bunch of groups of Cubans he had no control over or even directly opposed him. But that being said, it is hilarious to me that Castro in 1969, 6 years after the assassination, is down in Cuba like, yeah, there's no way he did that.
Hold on. I want to go back and cover this because this is actually really important.
Informant, while describing things that happened in Cuba in point 10, says, L1 talked about assassination of President John F. Kennedy, L1 being the informant. According to L1, in 1969, L1 personally saw Fidel Castro receive a group of U.S. radicals. Castro talked to them for 2 hours about why just one assassin could not possibly have killed Kennedy. Castro ordered a reenactment of the crime using his best marksman, and they could not duplicate what Lee Harvey Oswald supposedly did by himself. L1 said that 3 groups were involved in killing the president. 1 group of Cubans, 1 group of mafiosos, and a 3rd group of mercenaries. The 3rd group included a man with a Greek name. For one,
Guys, take the time to consume that, okay? I want you to just take the time to consume this. Let's go look at that. That 100146. Is this the one? This one. Here we go. Keep zooming in until it's nice and big for you guys. Lone talked about assassination of President John F. Kennedy. In 1969, Lone personally saw Fidel Castro receive a group of U.S. radicals. Castro ordered a reenactment of the crime using his best marksman. Guys, I want you to step back and think about that for a second. Before the Mythbusters tested the magic bullet theory, Ipsis Lucas Tomatoes tested the magic bullet theory. Castro tested the magic bullet theory before the Mythbusters. He literally myth-busted it. And then, the informant said that there were three groups: a group of Cubans, a group of mafiosos, and a group of mercenaries. I mean, this is absolutely insane to be reading in a document like this. Of course, it's still just this guy's opinion, Lone's opinion. Let's see if we can look up Lone. Can I find Lone? I think so. Welcome in. It's so good to see you too. Oh, I'm so glad to see you, Avon. We are just enjoying some wendigoon content.
And a third group of mercenaries. The third group included a man with a Greek name. For one, Castro saying that one of the groups was a group of Cubans doesn't explicitly mean that Castro was involved with the assassination, because there were a bunch of groups of Cubans he had no control over or even directly opposed him. But that being said, it is hilarious to me that Castro in 1969, 6 years after the assassination, is down in Cuba like, yeah, there's no way he did that. Absolutely not. And then he gets his best.
That's just so funny. That's so funny. Oh my
Marksman together
God.
to recreate the shooting, to say that it's impossible. This man he is literally me. Now we get into the more depressing stuff you probably expected, like lying to the American press. Because it had been suspected by many around this time that several nonprofits or otherwise legitimate organizations were either just CIA fronts or were allowing the CIA to operate through them. And of course, the CIA denied that, but as we see from internal memos like this one, they were lying. In this memo from the Assistant Deputy Director for Plans to the Deputy Director for
I haven't read this one yet.
Plans, in point 2, the Assistant Deputy says, early in April of 1968, the Office of the General Counsel made available to Central Cover staff a copy of a letter and an attached list of organizations sent to the Internal Revenue Service by Mr. John Frappier of Ramparts magazine. The letter, dated April 5th, 1968, had been furnished OGC through IRS liaison channels. The letter appended a list of 145 tax-exempt organizations and indicated that all were suspected of having been funded by or having cooperated with the CIA.
Guys. 145. Tax-exempt organizations that are working for, funded by, or corrupt cooperating with the CIA. 145. Non-profit organizations, tax-exempt. I mean, I hope he gets into it, because this is actually crazy. There are other documents that talk about this. Like there's, I can't remember the acronym right now, but basically, one of the largest student unions was a CIA front. They had CIA agents in every church in New England. like Catholic, Protestant, non-denominational, all of them. The CIA had infected every non-profit and tax-exempt organization in the mid-cloud and 842. In the mid-50s.
Suspected of having been funded by or having cooperated with the CIA. So in other words, this journalist put together a list of 145 tax-exempt organizations that he thinks are actually just cooperating with the CIA, and he published it in Ramparts magazine, but he also sent the list to the IRS, which, does he think that the IRS doesn't talk to the CIA? I don't know.
I don't know if wendigoon has been keeping up with recent events, but it has been pretty well demonstrated that government agencies withhold data from each other. They do it under the guise of privacy. But really, they charge each other money to send documents to each other. So, taxpayer money is transferred from one organization to another organization in exchange for your private information. Which means, no, the IRS probably had absolutely no idea what was in these black budgets. Think about the movie The Big Short. Did you guys see that? The Big Short was a really good movie. One thing that they get good and cover really well early is when Michael Berry says that the mortgage-backed securities were made by lawyers who didn't even know what they were looking at. In other words, they weren't financed people. They didn't understand the financial implications of what they were legally bundling together. The same thing can be said here. The IRS are legal people. They don't understand what's financially happening under the surface of congressionally approved finances. They spend all of their time looking at American citizens, not American organizations, speaking in public organizations.
Because sure enough, that's what happened. A liaison at the IRS sent it to the Office of General Counsel, who then sent it to the Central Intelligence Agency. It seems that the journalist wanted more information from the IRS so that he could confirm his suspicions on these groups being CIA operated. So what does the CIA say internally in this secret document? In point 4, they say, a review of available CIA data on the listed organizations has shown that 89 of them were at one time or another somehow associated with the CIA.
Look at the next line though. Only 2 of these are of current operational interest. Oh, wait a second. M.H. Dowell. Dow. M.H. Dowell. Okay, I'm gonna let him keep talking, because we're about to get something we can dig in on.
It goes on to say only 2 of these are of current operational interest. These 2 activities and 45 organizations formerly of interest to CIA were mentioned in the American press during M.H. Dowell. Again, a lot of this stuff is internal code words that we don't have context for, so just pretend like you know what M.H. Dowell means.
Yes, we do. We absolutely have context for these acronyms. So, there we go. The cryptonym. M.H. Dowell is a descriptor for Rampart's revelations in 1967 about the CIA's subsidies to the National Student Association, unions, businesses, foundations, and other groups in the public sphere. So, essentially, but M. Dowell didn't exist at the CIA. until it was leaked that associated operations in the press were real. So, M.H. Dowell is the report that Ramparts published in 1967 about subjects such as, "Where is it? Where is it? Come on." "We're looking for WSA. Child, is the name of the mission." Really? Oh, rude. But it says it right here in March 1967 issue of Ramparts. The disclosure was made that the CIA had, for 15 years, subsidized the largest national student union, National Students Association. Under the code name U-Shelds. Eventually, it became known that the agency funneled money directly or indirectly into a panoply of business, labor, and church groups, the universities, agricultural organizations, and educational and cultural groups. That was supposed to be charitable organizations, I'm sorry. 1 second, let's see if we can dig deeper into that. Is this the actual archive? Yes, but it's in another language. Rude. There we go. So, this is what they're talking about when they say, I, M.H. Dowell, oh. They're actually referring to this article in magazine. A short account of the international student politics and Cold War, with particular reference to the NSA, CIA, etc. Here, let me throw this link. Really want to read through all of this right now because it is quite a long magazine article, and I don't have my reading tools available. But suffice it to say, this was one of the early leaks that nonprofit organizations were being used by the CIA to spy on students. This was also part of Operation Chaos. In addition to COINTELOP Pro. Anyway, let's get back to it.
You can also see, and it's like this for a lot of the document, how MH Dowell is written in brackets. That means at one point it was redacted. It was cut through. So earlier versions of this document probably released, but they just had the redaction. 42 other listed organizations, which were in fact associated with CIA, were not exposed during MH Dowell. We have found no evidence that 55 organizations on the list were ever directly or indirectly associated with CIA. So, hey, 55 of them? Knock it off. Oh, and then in parentheses, he says, because 2 of the names on the list are successive names for the same organization, the actual total number of organizations listed is 144 rather than 145. So,
oh, I wish I had. I wish I had like a nerd emote of some sort. Because that is such an actually thing to say. Like the nerdy, actually. One of them was actually just the change of names. And the 55 of them weren't actually directly associated, according to them.
But then they go on to even defeat that point, because in point 8 they say, we cannot say with complete assurance that all 55 of the apparently innocent organizations on the Ramparts list in fact never had any agency ties. It's like, look, you may have been right about
See? 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 See what I'm saying? Even the IRS is like, wait a minute, you're the CIA? Fuck you. You're probably lying.
89 of them, but 55 we have nothing to do with. Probably, I think. Thankfully, the document doesn't suggest that they kill the journalist or whatever, at least not in this document. Just ends and says the headquarters that were responsible are now made aware and no further action is required. But again, we have early whistleblowers for government involvement in non-government agencies being proven correct. In our next memo within the CIA, we're given information about something known as truth tapes. In 1965, it seems that the CIA was producing these recordings that were supposed to be from independent parties, but were, again, the CIA. And they would distribute these recordings to be played at radio stations in Latin America and North America as a form of propaganda. And in this memo, we hear an update about an office that's conducting this in New Orleans. It says,
Pause for just a second, because this blew me away. This was another one of those things that was just so astounding to me. Lee Harvey Oswald's name does not show up in this document at all. It is literally just about the JM Wave project. To distribute propaganda radio tapes, radio stations across Central and South America. Anti-communist, specifically. They were called the truth tapes. They're real. Like DRS folks. Everyone's heard about stories of propaganda tapes like that being distributed. And we may have seen and heard of some of the ones that came out during the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, but really, we have gotten very few good examples of American propaganda. Posts, 1950. So instead, I'm just absolutely astonished to see them talking so openly about their efforts to distribute radio shows to all of Latin America and South America.
the current
Anyway,
program of
let's let him talk
INCA,
about
which
it,
is the
because this
Information
is
Council
actually
of the
super
Americas,
fascinating.
is primarily concerned with the dissemination of taped recordings of anti-communist material called truth tapes to certain radio broadcasting stations in Latin America and North America for use as a weapon against communist penetration in the Americas. And the rest of the document goes on to give status updates regarding the organization, but this is more confirmation of the CIA pretending to be voices of the people. I should also mention that a lot of this isn't any new news for a ton of people, especially people who have kept up with government documents in the past several decades. There's been several documents and reports that have come out related to truth tapes. It's not like this is any huge new news. But what is huge is that this is, for one, coming directly from the National Archives, and there are now 0 redactions to this stuff. So things like names, dates, and addresses are on full display. And again, while a lot of this has come out in previous releases of the JFK files, new information is being added. So again, we're covering everything that's new this week. All right, here's where we get into the fun stuff. So this dispatch regards the Special Activities Report on JM Wave's relationship with Carbon-1. JM Wave was a CIA post that was just south of the University of Miami in southern Florida. JM Wave comes up a ton of these documents because it was one of the closest CIA locations to Cuba. So it plays a major role in things like the Bay of Pigs invasion and the Cuban Missile Crisis. And Carbon-1 is a code name for a journalist at the Miami Herald who was working with the CIA.
Alright, let's take a step back right quick. Because this document is super hard to understand. I think he just gave us a really good overview of why JM Wave matters, but I want to take a moment to actually go into greater detail. JB Echo. Where's Jamwave? There we go. Alright, so Jamwave was enormous, and they managed all this. A ton of informants. What's the word I'm looking for? When a person technically works for the CIA, but isn't hired by the CIA, it doesn't really get paid for them, but they're not so low level that they're an informants. Like an asset. I guess asset is the word I'm looking for. There are over 28 M. Carbone. Basically, Mockingbird journalists. Project Mockingbird journalists. Where's my cryptonyms? Here we go. You've got people like AM Carbon 1, AM Carbon 2, AM Crab 1, which was a guy on a crab boat, just sitting on a crab boat watching out there, looking for other boats. AM? Oh, Carbon was a journalist at the Miami Herald. And I don't think we know his name yet. Albert. His name is Alan Burtz. Although, honestly, that sounds like a fake name too. All of the operations involving Cuba had to run out of this office in part, because this office was the only place with the radio coverage that could listen in on all of Cuba. Essentially, they were within 100 miles of Cuba, so any frequency below, I think, 300 megahertz, was completely within range to be listened to. It was a very important listening station, but it was also involved in the Cuban community in Miami. Burgeoning. Remember, there was a time when Cubans were not a big part of the American community. We tried to make Cuba like a desktop, like a vacation destination. But the people who are running it, Castro, they hated America. They hated what we were doing to their country, basically looting them through tourism. So, in order to keep an eye on the situation, not only did we have to listen to the radio in as close a place as possible without being obvious, we also had to have people who were in the community who could talk to Cubans on this side of the water. Who had already floated across and were now making their home in Miami before it had expanded to the Miami we know today. The CIA was deeply involved in that refugee crisis. This is how far this spiderweb goes, by the way. You keep looking, and it keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper. There's always so much more connected to it all. And then you come across more acronyms, and those acronyms lead to other acronyms. And those acronyms lead to other acronyms. I'm pretty sure the Miami Herald was half CIA spies.
What does the CIA say about him? Well, in the introduction to this paper, they say, the recommendation was made that JM Wave be given approval to contact the major South Florida news media in an attempt to work out a relationship with these news media which would ensure that they did not turn the publicity spotlight on those Q-bark activities in South Florida which might come to their attention.
Kubark. QRK is perhaps one of the most irritating cryptonames that the CIA uses.
Q-bark
second,
is an
let's see if he
internal
mentions it.
reference to the CIA itself. So the
That is not quite correct. Now, Kubark is technically the name. I'd love to enjoy this Dutch. A good Instagram, an Instagram Carol UE, intelligence manual that the CIA uses. The Kubark Counterintelligence Interrogation Manual. This manual teaches you how to do things like screen for your interrogation, plan your interrogation, use non-coercive intelligence, and then coercive intelligence. The, including risk wilderness stealth, attention, deprivation of sensory stimuli, threats and fear, the ability, pain, heightened suggestibility and hypnosis, i.e., drugs, narcosis, i.e., drugs, the detection of malingering, how to tell if someone's resisting. And this name is what the CIA in the 60s and 70s likes to call itself. Hello, Jane. Thank you. Welcome in. Of this model, this is a model by, oh, I need to go, by Kiyoki Studio. It's publicly available like all the other pre-mades that I use. I love it so much. In fact, let me show off a little bit. I'm just gonna scoot up here a little bit. Sorry, I'm blocking chat, guys. You guys, overs. There we go. How's that, guys? Anyway, so the CIA talks about themselves in these kinds of documents. They say Kubark when they're talking about themselves. And Kubark literally is just them identifying with their counterintelligence interrogation training. "131 pages, half of which is how to torture, and how to slowly escalate torture. So that's what Kubark is, and I want you guys to remember that, because that's extremely important for this. Every time they say Kubark, they're basically trying to pretend. This is what is expected of them. By implying that it's part of the manual, it's the manual that told them to do this, not the CIA, not the agency. You know, I don't know if it's an abbreviation. Let me double check. I don't have enough money for search for limits, so able at the end of the arc dial. Thankfully, I can use other people's search engines. Oh, CIA headquarters. Okay. It's still kind of, looking at it through blurry glass. But, yeah, this is one of those things the CIA does. They like to talk in the third person.
CIA was communicating and making relationships with journalists so that the journalists would not talk about what the CIA was doing. Thus, when a relationship was established with AM Carbon 2, it was carefully cultivated in order that JM Wave might be able to use this contact at the Identity 3. Identity 3 means a newspaper publishing or like news outlet, as a means of achieving the objective of having a relationship with the Identity 3, which would simultaneously ensure the security of JM Wave's operations and give JM Wave an outlet into the press, which could be used for surfacing certain select propaganda items. So not only to keep the news from talking about them, but to get the news to talk about what we want them to talk about. If anyone ever calls me a conspiracy theorist again, I'm gonna punch him. And point.
Yes, my friend, yes. The CIA is literally admitting to not only influencing what they don't print, but giving them propaganda to print instead. Mockingbird Media. I'm not insane. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I was just right.
If anyone ever.
Here's the thing that I love though, okay? Take a moment to step back, right? And think about this. M. Carbon 2 is a journalist named Albert Dartingway, who works at the Miami Herald's. Identity 1 is someone who works at the Miami Herald who isn't of CIA asset. Identity 2 is someone who is at the South Campus of Florida University. And Identity 3, I can't really infer who that is, but all of these people have their own personal interests, right? The journalist wants to always be able to publish. He wants to sound and feel and be known as the person who always has the story first, even if that means hiding things for his sources. And then you have people who are just kids for the most part, people on college campuses, and people who have jobs at the newspaper but aren't working with the CIA, that these CIA agents are working with, like without disclosing what they're doing. And this is standard practice for them. This is just what they do. It's so standard practice that they're talking about it plainly here in the introduction, with no fanfare.
Review, AM Carbon 2 pointed out that it was the policy of the Identity 3, again a news outlet, that it would take no action which would purposefully embarrass QBark or its South Florida operations. So that is a supposedly freely spoken American press outlet saying that they would never do anything to hurt the CIA. As a result, if any embarrassing items relative to QBark's operations in South Florida did come to the attention of the Identity 3, this material would be brought to Rootman's immediate attention. Rootman is a code for the CIA agent who's operating with them directly. The point was also made that AM Carbon 1 should not press for the obtaining of classified information, but he should be alert to steering tips which Rootman might furnish him on fast-breaking news stories.
I want you guys to also realize Macarbon 1 and Macarbon 2, and don't know that they're both assets. They both know they work for the CIA, but the one doesn't know that the other works for the CIA, and no one else at the Miami Herald, other than possibly the editor, knows they work for the CIA. I mean, that's insane. That's absolutely mind-blowing, and we know that this isn't the only newspaper. 28 AM Carmen's, and not all of them worked at the Miami Herald. We know that a certain Am was actually, what's his name? So, in that story, the Deep Throat story, where Woodward and Bernstein supposedly met with a CIA agent. In order to get that scoop, Woodward was a spy. Woodward worked for the CIA. He was naval intelligence. Bernstein was a good reporter. He had no idea Woodward was one of these M carbons, or well, his code was probably something like Am Winter. Possibly M Whale. There's a lot of them, right? But Am was basically, if you were a writer in the media and you worked for the CIA, you had an AM classification. It's just so crazy to me that the wild web of social networks they're manipulating here, and everyone thinks that they're in control.
Carbon 1 indicated that he understood the frame of reference, which had been outlined by Am Carbon 2. These are two journalists at the same place. This frame of reference has prevailed through JM Wave's relationship with Am Carbon 1 during the period of December of 1962 to March of 1964. So they can't ask for any classified information, but they need to tell the CIA when something important happens. It's so weird reading this stuff and kind of peeking behind the veil because they just say everything outright. Like in point 5, it says operational support. On occasion, Am Carbon 1 is used to carry out certain operational support tasks. In such instances, Am Carbon 1 makes his inquiries or carries out the required action within the context of his normal journalistic activities. The use of Am Carbon 1 for operational support tasks enables JM Wave to harness the investigative facilities of the Identity 3. Several examples of how Am Carbon 1 has been used in operational support tasks are outlined below. And it goes on to list a ton of useful information that has been passed on to the CIA through this asset. And some of this you may be thinking is fine. And there are some instances, like there's a case where Am Carbon 1 told the CIA that there were reports of Cubans hiding missiles in caves near US soil. So some stuff like that, it's like, I get it. I understand why the press would pass that along. But in other cases, it's just to cover their own skin. Like here it says that in October of 1963, Am Carbon 1 informed JM Wave about the flood of telephone calls which were being received at the Identity 3 relative to so-called Q-bark vessels which were located in South Florida waters. And a couple things to note. For one, the reason...
Hold on. Let's back up just a second. So from this, we can infer that Identity 3 is actually probably the editor of the Miami Herald. Or if not the editor, another person close to the editor. And we also get introduced in a bit to Identity 5. Remember, they're monitoring all of these people at the same time. They're not allowed to ask for classified information, but they have to give information to the CIA. Yeah, vadad. Alright, dog is being a bitch. Be a bit of a brat. She keeps trying to get up as soon as by paying attention to you guys, she's starting to cause problems. Antagonizing everyone else. Anyway, I've got her laying next to me now. Anyway, what I was trying to say is they're talking about Q-bark vessels, which are located in South Florida waters. I referenced these before. With J.M. Crab. Jam Crab is actually just a program where the CIA had assets that ran crab boats. The cell crab boats in the Mediterranean now. I don't know if you guys know much about catching crab, but I don't think you can do it in the Mediterranean. But, nonetheless. Kubark boats, CIA boats. We're in the Mediterranean, and everyone knew they were CIA boats because you can't catch crabs between Florida and Cuba. Am I saying Mediterranean? Oh my God, Caribbean. I'm so sorry. Anyway, that's what they're talking about here. They're talking about the fact that the CIA has fake fishing boats, fake crab boats in the worst possible places that are completely obvious to everyone. They're CIA operatives and not fishermen.
which were located in South Florida waters. And a couple things to note. For one, the reason that you probably don't want to be super chummy with these guys is because, as we're going to talk about in a bit, they were not always the altruist. They weren't doing a lot of this stuff to just look good in the press and help people, especially when it comes to Cuba. There were some wild things happening. And two, and I really mean it because all the names are declassified now, do not harass, I think all these people are dead, but do not harass the memory or anyone associated with these people.
They are all dead, by the way. Every time I came across a name, I made sure to look up whether or not they're dead. I'm pretty sure there's only, like, a handful of people, statistically speaking, who are still alive. This point, though, who are documented in these documents that is. Like, there's only a few people over the age of 81. Right. In America as it is.
People, while yes, a lot of this sounds bad, and I disagree with it, you have to understand that the CIA would not approach these people in a friendly manner. While I'm sure there were some cases of willing corroboration, when an organization like that comes up to you and says you're going to help them out, you kind of have to help them out. At least if you want to maintain any public face or have your company maintain a public face. Point 7. Amcarbon 1 has been used successfully during the period covered by this report as a propaganda outlet through which items of interest to QBARC, the CIA, could be surfaced in the free world press. And then they list a bunch of cases.
He's skipping over the best parts. Oh no, this is really good stuff. Alright, so... On 26th of February, 1964, JM Wave learned that when Mr. Charles Griffin's sons went to Cuba to reclaim a hijacked shrimp boat, Johnny Rabe, they found that the selected items were missing from the boat when it was turned over to them. It was believed that this information would make a good human interest story, which JM Wave assets could use to counter Gawk propaganda claims that United States officials had stolen items from the Cuban fishing boats, which had violated United States territorial waters. In the view of this opinion, a steering tip was given to Amcarbon 1. In other words, they lied to him. To have Identity 3 representative in Key West interview Mr. Griffin. This interview was carried out. An article outlining the points which were of interest to JM Wave. To the CIA were published in the 27th of February 1964 edition of Identity 3's newspaper. That's absolutely amazing. The CIA basically is interfering with American shipping in order to stop Cubans from fishing in American territorial waters. Some Cubans steal this guy's boat. The CIA goes and gets it back, but takes things, and then instead instructs the Miami Heralds to just go interview the guy and give him good press. And when? Just say what the CIA says. They turned him into a human interest story so no one would dig deeper into the fact the CIA was directly involved in everything happening. Crab is insane and a crazy story all into its own.
Of that happening. And what's so crazy about this, since everything is declassified now, at the end of the report, they just have a picture of the news article that just tells you it's the Miami Herald, and it gives like the author's name and everything. Like, it's so wild. There's some interesting field reports, like here, an agent in Cuba says that a man named Jose Xavier Cortez is passing himself off as a priest when he's actually not one, and says some things like, in Cuba, the Knights of Columbus are well entrenched. Again, another rabbit hole for another day. There's a bunch of documents that just kind of expand on the level of espionage that the CIA has, like here where it says that there's going to be a meeting of communist sympathizers in Paris, and the CIA already has people there. I haven't seen it in the reports I've read, but I've heard people talking about the JFK files, and they mention a file somewhere that says at some meeting in France, or maybe it was within the French embassy, that there were more people there who were either CIA agents or CIA liaisons who were like paid off by the CIA than people that weren't.
Totally. I don't remember the document that he's talking about, but this is the problem that was. Hy-Vee is everywhere, and it wasn't just the French embassy. Like the fact that that's the Miami Herald was 10 people. And 3 of them were CIA agents, and 5 of them were being manipulated by CIA agents. For the fact that 28 of the members of Alpha 66, one of the Cuban groups that I'm pretty sure he's going to get into, 28 of those people were CIA informants. The entire terrorist group, half the terrorist group in Cuba, or of that cell of the terrorist group, were CIA agents or CIA informants. It's boondering the bottle of soap and colors. Feel rooftops up to this inventory. To the lake for the price in. You couldn't throw a rock without hitting a CIA agent in any of these places.
So in a
Or, wait, what's the old saying? You couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting a spook?
French political meeting, more people in the room are with the Central Intelligence Agency than otherwise. Again, I think that came from one of the earlier dumps of information in the JFK files, but regardless is insane. There's also some documents like this one that show you the National Archives history of this stuff, where it goes from being accepted to some parts being redacted to some parts being unredacted, and eventually to the release we have now. Now, there are some internal memos that give an idea of what the CIA was thinking during a lot of these historic events, why they were so paranoid. This intelligence report comes from JM Wave to the director of the CIA. That is information they gathered from an agent stationed in Cuba.
Before we get into this, guys, I need to take just a little bit of a break. The dogs need to go to the bathroom. I need to let them stretch their legs because they're actually being super good right now. And they settled down after I called them out. So, let me throw on some lo-fi for you guys right quick. And I will be back very shortly, guys. I'm going to just go to the bathroom. I'm going to get some water. Take a little bit of a break. You guys should do the same. Get some water, maybe do some squats. Stretch. Take care of yourself for me. Alright, be right back. All right, did everyone get some water? Did everyone do what they needed to do? I hope so. Because I'm back. I'm back. Server is that server has the key and spans swift with odds. Server has the cutest emotes.
It says that on October 11th, 1963, again in Cuba, 6 large trailer trucks entered Torrens, and on October 9th, 10 more of these large trailer trucks entered the base. An unidentified driver of a vehicle traveling behind one of the trucks reportedly observed tube-like objects which protruded at least 1 meter beyond the truck bed of one of the trailers, when by chance the wind blew to one side of the tarpool covering the trailer's cargo. And considering that this base in Cuba was suspected of having surface-to-air missiles, the CIA thought that Cuba was putting together a larger missile array, supposedly to use against the United States. So of course the solution to that, as you could imagine, is to threaten the Miami Herald. Speaking of weird things that the CIA did involving Cuba, this one is wild. Okay, so for context, in May of 1959, the new China news agency opened an office in Havana in the El Medico.
Well, before we get to this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, that was just a really good line. When? He kind of breezed over it. But this transportation of missiles into Cuba in 1963 is actually part of Russia, arming an opposition group, not arming Russia themselves. This is part of the Alpha 66 thing, which is super crazy. And I really hope he gets into it. It's insane. Basically, the CIA and the KGB were trying to court this terrorist group to work for them. One to do terrorism in Cuba, and one to do terrorism in the United States. And they were playing both sides. They were playing the KGB to get weapons, and they were playing the CIA to get intelligence. The CIA helped them get weapons into the United States. It's such an insane story, and I really hope he gets into it.
In May of 1959, the new China news agency opened an office in Havana in the El Medico building, which is occupied partly by business concerns and partly used for residential apartments.
Oh shit, guys. I think this is the story about how the CIA basically was buying every apartment next to or above a Chinese newspaper agency to spy on them. This is like Looney Tunes level comedy to me, guys. This is so funny. They're like, oh, guys. New China newspaper opened up in Cuba. We need to get the next door apartment so we can listen to them. Oh, wait, guys. The newspaper got bigger. We need to buy the entire floor above them so we can listen to them. They just keep. In the field where purchasing this cash can be more high. Even taking multi-wages. Sein Gewinn diversicals, ramp relatively fixed, L-in, and buying space. Like interleaving between real companies and New China. Newspaper F. So, there's this building was, basically, which has been draining to the everywhere right now. 1/3 CIA, 1/3 other real companies. Geez, I'm getting bad hallucinations, guys. I don't know what's causing that. Let's see if I can tune my volume better. Because that might just be the problem. But this story is just Looney Tunes comedy to me. But they're just like trying to buy up all the space next to and aligned with the newspaper. They could spy, and the amount of effort that goes into it.
So China puts a news agency in Havana inside of a building that has some apartment rooms in it. Well, the CIA can't let that happen, so it says shortly thereafter, the Havana station, talking about the CIA station in Havana, obtained the concurrence of Ambassador Bonzel and Miss Carolyn O. Stacy, an embassy employee, to mount an audio operation against the New China News Agency through the wall of the adjacent apartment in which Miss Stacy lived. So in November of 59, it says they installed a microphone and tape recorder inside of Miss Stacy's apartment to listen to the news agency next door. But by 1960, the Chinese news agency had expanded to more parts of the apartment building, and I guess the CIA's microphones couldn't hear that far. So a case officer named Brian Mills goes down, and he rents a room that is not next to the Chinese operation. It's above it and I guess further across the room. So after he rents that room, he puts a team in that room to listen down on what the news agency is doing. And it says that a group of technicians go down and installed a probe microphone and tape recorder in the apartment obtained by Mills over the NCNA office. About this time, the equipment was removed from Miss Stacy's apartment with the exception of the plastic probe, which was left in the wall and plastered over. So they have enough stuff on top of the news agency. They don't need Miss Stacy's room next to the agency anymore. As an additional security precaution to provide a safe haven, and after consultation with the acting chief of station, a key to an apartment in the same building leased by Mrs. Marjorie Lennox, an embassy secretary, was obtained. Mrs. Lennox was told that access to her apartment was needed for photographic surveillance purposes. So they find someone else who is staying in the building and get her to give them a key for photographic purposes, I guess assuming that they need to take photos of something across the street or whatever, not knowing that it's actually so they can spy on other people in the same building. So they're lying to even the people who are giving them a safe haven. But then things get complicated because it says that the owners of the building were canceling subleasers' contracts and recalling leases. So in other words, they'd probably have to vacate the space soon. So they decide, well, if we can't be in the room, we'll just install transmitters in the room, and then we'll just set up a listening post nearby, and someone else will be living in that space, but we'll still be spying out of it. So they send another 3-man team to Havana to install all this stuff. But then on September 14th at midnight, someone who, I'm not kidding, their name is Christ, was one of the technicians working on the apartment, says, failed to keep a scheduled appointment with NEAT. At 1 a.m., on the 15th of September, the apartment of Mrs. Lennox was entered into and searched by Cuban authorities, and she was taken into custody. So the first girl who they were using as a listening post originally, she gets arrested because I guess they get privy to what's going on here, the Cuban authorities. But then it says at 3:40 the next day, September 15th, NEAT, the stay-behind agent, and his wife were picked up by the Cuban authorities and detained. So everyone who was installing these microphones got arrested. Christ failed to have an appointment with Neat, and therefore Lennox was arrested. Completely unreadable by modern standards. And at the time of writing this, the agents are still under arrest. So I think Neat's actually a typo. I think it's Nest, but I'm going to keep saying Neat. And point 8, it says, according to articles in the Cuban papers, the 3 technicians were arrested while in the apartment over the NCNA office and completing the installations of the equipment. The press article adds that the keys to Mrs. Lennox's apartment was found on one of the technicians who identified the apartment to which it belonged. All Cuban press releases have referred to the men by alias and have not identified them as government or agency employees. So thank God. They can be in jail, that's fine, but as long as they don't know we hired them. It is unclear at present what story has been agreed upon by the technicians and station personnel to be used in the event that they were caught. While being interrogated with Neat, Christ indicated that Neat was his boss, and Neat consistently denied any knowledge as to why he was being held. The sublease for the apartment in which the men were caught is in the name of the stay-behind agent, with the original lease being in the name of Mills, the FE Division's case officer. So everything's like 5 degrees of separation removed, so it doesn't tie back to the agency. So a lot of the rest of the document talks about what's to be done with these agents because they're effectively being charged with espionage against China, and the CIA is talking internally about they don't really know if they can do anything for them without, revealing that the CIA was involved, and they can't let that happen because then that's like, an act of war. There's a funny note at the end where it says, insofar as the families are concerned, one of the technicians is a bachelor presently on home leave between 2 tours in Japan. His father, a cook in a diner in the Boston area, has been contacted by the Office of Security, and he will get in touch with security if he receives any inquiries on the matter. So it's like, okay, we've notified the one's dad. The other one... It says in point 13, the wives of the other 2 technicians have been told what has happened and are being contacted at least once daily by TSD staffers and their wives who have been briefed on the situation. A conference with the 2 wives was held on September 19th to go over the whole situation and determine if there was any personal problems on which the agency could be of help. For the time being, the wives are telling their neighbors that their husbands are on a trip. The story will be adjusted depending on what course of action the Cuban government takes, whether the aliases remain unbroken, and whether recognizable photographs of the individuals are released to the press. The 2 wives so far have been taking the bad news exceedingly well.
Let's just take a moment to pause and think about what we've just seen. The CIA are fucking cowboys in this story. They have no fucking idea what they're doing. They're just trying to get information on a newspaper. At no point in any of this intel do we actually get actionable intelligence on China. No documents tell us what they were actually looking at, what they were listening for. No. What happened is, they go through all this trouble to spy, get all these identifiable faces going through. And then all of them get arrested because it's obvious somehow that they are stealing or spying on this map, on this newspaper agency. Probably the Chinese. Recognized that there were these crazy people in the next apartment over and in the apartment upstairs, and very American people coming through the halls and doing installation work. Just cowboys. Complete Wild West behavior, and no responsibility taken whatsoever. Absolute madness, the lot of them.
Hey, so we hired your husband to go set up a listening post at the Chinese embassy in Cuba, and they both got arrested. And we can't really do anything about it because, like, oh no, the CIA, am I right? So if you could tell all of your neighbors that they're on vacation or cheating on you or something, I don't know. And we'll keep doing that lie unless the Cuban government posts their face, and then we'll say they're like traitors or something. Is that okay? And the wives are like, yeah.
There's a good reason why I don't actually take this stuff as bad as it actually is. Why I try to have a sense of humor about it. Because if I didn't, I would be completely destroyed as a human being by how absolutely disgusting that is. So I have to see the Looney Tunes and Wild West qualities in order to cope with the absolute horrific reality. Those poor women. Those poor women who, after all the Looney Tunes that was going on, had to hear, "We can't do anything for your husband, even though he was doing things for us. Because we're idiots and didn't think this through." No, it's better to think of them as Looney Tunes, as cartoon characters.
This is so insane. I swear. Like if so much of the stuff in here is like if you wrote it into a movie, it would be too unbelievable. There is an attached reply that talks about the task of getting these guys out of custody, but sadly the file is so corrupted it's hard to read. In mission, I believe it says the 145th or 1045th operational evacuation and whatever tree whatever group provides black air transportation something to CONUS, the continental United States, to the designated area. So it sounds like they were trying to do a black air operation.
Okay, let's take a moment and step back. What we're looking at here, and talk about what black air actually is. In the 1960s, the United States did not have nearly as many black sites. We do today. But the network was being constructed at that time. The CIA was well known for owning airlines, for having a major investment in Pan Am Y, for having small airline companies for their going to Baham for their lease. Having those small companies that did things like run drugs, or own traffic people without having to extradite them. Black Air was that entire progress, that entire project. Not only to have airplanes that they could fly without anyone noticing, but also places they could land that plane and escort prisoners. To serve as black prisons. I think one of the most famous ones is in Poland right now. Most of them can actually be found on Google Maps. But at this point, the only black sites that we had were basically within flying distance of Miami and New Orleans. However, I guess we might have had some in Switzerland and Brazil at the time, based on what I'm reading here. I haven't read this document before. I haven't read this one. I really wish it was easier to read.
Which essentially means an off-the-books air operation to get these guys out of Cuba. So it looks like from the skewed text that a flight out of Mexico was being used, and in the rest of the text, it says that they're putting together a C-45 to transport these guys out of Cuba and then get them back to the United States in 15 hours. So surprisingly, they didn't just leave them there, for whatever that's worth. I don't know how they got them out of custody and onto a runway to get into a C-54 to get to Mexico, but whatever. Documents like this kind of give you an idea into what the CIA was doing in the 50s and 60s, and it's also just a really wild story that would be hard to believe had it not come directly from the CIA's own office.
I am going to say that I respect the CIA's efforts in an exfiltration operation. We don't get the details, and those details would make the best fucking movie. Don't get me wrong. But nonetheless, they did do an exfiltration operation to get those guys out of jail in Cuba. And we can usually assume in those situations that what they're doing is finding the people like the Marines and the Army guys who do work with the CIA at, putting them in a small team with a CIA operative, and then doing a mixture of military and covert operations under some SOCOM classification. In which they just basically go in, make a big scene, shock and awe, exfiltrate and disappear. And normally countries won't admit to losing spies like this, because that would just be admitting to failure and making themselves look weak. The details, I can't tell you the details of how they got them out. I wish I could, but we can safely assume, based on how they've done other operations, that there is one CIA operative who specializes in exfiltration. And then, probably, Air Force, Marines, and maybe an Army guy. Please, Commissioner Hill. Only given enough information to understand what they're doing, and might not even know where they are, where they're doing the operation. Keep watching. I am talking too much. I might have to split this into 2 videos. Or 2 streams, rather.
Because from using people's rooms to spy on people in the building and then having these secret flights to get people out of the country, it's really wild stuff. It'd be cool if they were, cool. Some documents like this one just indicate that the CIA had plants near people like Che Guevara, as you could probably imagine. Similar to the thing mentioned earlier about Rampart doing a piece on companies that are actually CIA fronts or have CIA ties. This document talks about a business called Ace Marine Survey Incorporated that is actually a JM Wave cover facility. In the description for this business, it says this is a Florida corporation established by and under the control of JM Wave and certified to do business in Florida. Ace Marine Survey Incorporated was formerly known as Ace Cartography Company, a corporation which had been certified to do business in Florida on the 11th of June, 1962. This corporation was amended on November the 4th of 66 to its new name, Ace Marine Survey. Ace Marine Survey is engaged primarily in marine research, including the study of marine life and testing marine equipment. However, its general provisions permit it to perform almost any corporate function. Use. JM Wave use of the corporation is to provide cover for a maritime vessel, the MV Sonora. Corporation provides status cover and payrolling of the agents assigned to the MV Sonora and the safe area or berthing site from which the vessel operates in the performance of its ostensible business. It goes on to say that the corporation was providing status cover and payrolling for 10 Cubans as of January 31st, 1967. So we have records of a business that publicly looks like a center for marine studies, but in reality is just so the CIA can have boats near Cuban waters. And the 10 people that work there, if anyone was to investigate it, looks like they are actually payrolled by the company and everything is straightforward, when in reality, everything is CIA. There's letters like,
There was also a detail he just skipped over in there. Most of them were Cubans. These were basically, like, hey, hold on. MV Barbie and MV8. These are real boats. I think we can look them up on here. And if I remember correctly, no, this isn't it. I'm not finding the records, but I know I've read about them before in other documents. And the missions these guys were on were very weird. It's not like it was 100% nefarious purposes. This is one of those times where I'm going to feel like awful. Because I'm actually defending what the CIA was going to do. One of the reasons we had those boats out there was specifically to rescue Cuban refugees who are riding desks and pieces of wood across the water. The CIA wanted to get to them first, before humanitarian aid, in order to make sure they got the ones who actually had actionable information. So, the refugees who actually made it ashore usually weren't the ones you cared about. The CIA cared about the ones they had already met, and they gave them a job. This kind of facility.
And everything is straightforward, when in reality, everything is CIA. There's letters like this about the CIA internally checking up on people who have some degree of influence but seem to have communist sympathies. Like, here's a letter internally about someone named Courtwood, the son of an attorney named Fosterwood, who, it says, appears to be actively engaged in the organization of a local chapter of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. So again, if someone was suspected of having communist ties, the CIA was doing checkups on them. Here's a document where a CIA agent or operative was tailing someone, and the person they were tailing threw a receipt in a trash can, so the agent dug out the receipt and then made record of it. So here's an interesting file that doesn't really have to do with the CIA or like things around the assassination, but it's just a folder about someone named Abram Shays. But then there's actually a note regarding the House Select Committee of Assassinations, which was the committee that was put together to review the assassinations of JFK and MLK. And they have a note attached that says, a review of the House Select Committee on Assassination volumes did not surface an Abram Shays, but an Abraham Shays, a legal advisor to the State Department, who maintained that at the time Oswald received his visa to enter Russia from the Soviet embassy in Helsinki, normally 1 week would elapse between the time of a tourist application and the issuance of a visa. It would appear that Abram and Abraham are not identical to each other. Betty Litchenfield of the House Select Committee reviewed the file on August 17, 1978, and that this guy was a Harvard Law School professor who attended a Pugwash conference in Munich in 1977. So to show how thorough the House Select Committee was, this guy isn't even the same guy who they're looking for. They're looking for a guy who made one statement that Oswald should have taken longer to get his visa.
This kind of document is why it's so hard to go through all 60,000, 80,000 pages of available documentation. So often you're going to find things that are literally just procedural documents that have like 10 pages of cover documents. And then it's just one person who's like, we were asked about this person, we didn't find anything about that person, but we did find this other person, and they're not the same person. But that is the kind of level of detail that went into these initial documents long before they were released. And I'm really glad for that fact, honestly. Like, these little things give so much more flesh and reality to the story. Not because they pertain to the story directly, but because they show you the procedures that everyone is working under.
And then there's this other guy who has a similar name, who they still put the whole report on and turned it over and said it's probably not relevant, but just in case. Again, it's for reasons like this that there are so many files. There's a letter here from an anti-Castro Cuban guerrilla fighter who was being held in a Cuban prison, and he wrote a letter requesting more money for guerrilla forces, indicating, that the CIA was funding guerrilla forces in Cuba, even though they historically denied that kind of thing a lot. And would you look at this, a document that details a shipment of 20 pistols, 6 submachine guns, and 1 bazooka, which is cargo that was dropped off to Cuban guerrilla fighters. And then a note at the end that says, also report 2 successful drops. Each drop consisted of 63 submachine guns. So would you look at that, money and guns going to Cuban fighters?
Yeah, nothing to do with Lee Harvey Oswald, as you might note. But there are tons of these documents in the records. Justice. We found a Cuban in a boat. We called the State Department, and the State Department said that he was working for us, so we let him deliver his illegal guns upriver. Yay! We have these guys in Cuba. They delivered their guns, and oh yeah, they also delivered guns to guys in the United States. It doesn't have anything specifically to do with Lee Harvey Oswald, or GFK, but it does have to do with that, with the greater focus on Cuba that the CIA had at the time.
Even though publicly they were very against that sort of thing. There's one document in here somewhere. I think I lost it, but, and I'm not going through the 80,000 pages to find it again, but it was over maintenance and attaching a rear sight to an FAL rifle, which an FAL rifle is a rifle that was used by a lot of like European forces and like South American countries around this time, but the United States never adopted. So why would the United States have things related to the operation of the rifle? Probably so they could send weaponry like that to places like Cuba and it not be directly associated as a United States shipment.
Okay, I really hate that I keep defending the CIA here. But there's a lot more reasons than just the Cuban situation to have that documentation. The CIA sets up covert operations, not dissimilar to Gladio and other stay-behind operations. So they have to know the weapons that they're going to be using on the ground no matter where they are. I have downloaded so many weapons manuals that are basically copies of the CIA's copy of the weapons manual. In fact, if you guys want to after this, we might be able to spend some time searching up some field manuals and CIA manuals on archive.org, just so you can see just how broad that data set is. I might be able to dig up my data set after stream too, I'm not sure yet. I have a very large data set, but it's on another server, and I need to go dig it up.
Or, something like that. What do I know? Here we get an interesting memo from within the CIA relating to someone named John Garrett Underhill, and specifically an article from Ramparts concerning him. Ramparts was really testing the CIA's patience, it would seem, around this time. So the CIA memo quotes the Rampart article by saying, "The day after the assassination, Gary Underhill left Washington in a hurry. Late in the evening, he showed up at the home of friends in New Jersey. He was very agitated. A small clique within the CIA was responsible for the assassination," he confided, "and he was afraid for his life and probably would have to leave the country." Less than 6 months later, Underhill was found shot to death in his Washington apartment. The coroner ruled it suicide. A researcher and writer on military.
Every time I hear the words "the coroner ruled it suicide," I have the immediate reaction that they were killed. Like, it could be someone that I knew had serious mental illness and suicidal ideation. And if someone told me that they shot themselves in the head, my first thought is, no, the CIA killed them. I can't begin to tell you how much I distrust the idea of someone killing themselves by shooting themselves in the head. 1. It's unreliable. 2. People are very scared of shooting themselves. They're scared of shooting if they haven't practiced. Oh, did Timcast cover this? Yeah, Gary Underhill is a very strange story. I haven't watched Timcast in a long time now, probably a couple years. They have gotten, Like Tim has compromised on a lot of his morals in a way that just doesn't make sense to me.
Military affairs.
Anyway,
He
let's
was
get
on a
back into it.
first-name basis with many of the top brass in the Pentagon. He was also on intimate terms with a number of high-ranking CIA officials. He was one of the agency's unpeople who performed special assignments. At one time, he had been a friend of Samuel Cummings of Interarmco, the arms broker that numbers among its customers the CIA and, ironically, Klein Sporting Goods of Chicago, from which the mail order Carcano allegedly was purchased by Oswald. So all that to say that Rampart ran an article saying that John Underhill's death a month after the Kennedy assassination was suspicious. Now, a bunch of people have highlighted this, the fact that these lines appear in a CIA document to say, oh, well, there's the CIA admitting that they unalived this guy or whatever. When no, that is just the CIA quoting the article that said the CIA did it. It goes on to say the verdict of suicide in Underhill's death is by no means convincing. His body was found by a writing collaborator, Asher Byrnes of the New Republic. He had been shot behind the left ear and an automatic pistol was under his left side. Odd, says Byrnes, because Underhill was right-handed. Byrnes thinks the pistol was fitted with a silencer, and occupants of the apartment building could not recall hearing a shot. Underhill obviously had been dead several days. So no, the CIA is not weirdly wording this to talk about themselves in the third person and imply they might have had something to do with it. Again, they're just quoting the article. So then that quote within this memo is replied by a check of what the CIA knows about John Underhill. They talk about his military career some before saying, a CIA memo of February and October 1949 show that there was interest by the New York office of the OO Contacts Division in using subject as a contact for foreign intelligence. Name checks were conducted with various military members of the intelligence community, but these yielded insufficient information, and OO was advised that contact should be developed with caution on a limited basis, and that subject was not to receive information classified higher than confidential. So the original Rampart article is saying that Underhill had very close, strong connections to the CIA, but the CIA's memo here is saying that in 1949 we checked him out for it, but evaluated that we couldn't give him super secret stuff and could only use him in a limited capacity. And then talking about Cummings, the arms dealer, the CIA's like, yeah, we bought stuff from him, and they're ours, and when we sell them, we'll keep the money. It's like, that part's true. And at the end it says, it is noted that Underhill, Cummings, and Interarmco have not appeared to date in any press or classified reports of the Garrison investigation in New Orleans, with the tenuous exception of the Ramparts article cited at the outset of this memo. So this is basically a memo of the CIA being like, hey, this
By the way, the Garrison investigation is the subject of the 1991 JFK movie, the one made by Oliver Stone.
newspaper says that we killed this guy. Did we kill this guy? Do you guys? I can't find anything. Did we kill this guy? But no, internally, they're like, Ramparts is alleging we did this. This is all the info we have on him, and he hasn't appeared anywhere else. Now, again, I mention all this because that excerpt at the beginning gets passed around a lot. People saying, like, oh, here's the CIA saying they killed this guy. That's not what it's saying. They're reviewing an article that said that they killed someone. Now, I'm not bringing this up to say that the CIA didn't kill Underhill. They very well might have. But if they did, they didn't write it down on a piece of paper to be passed around and then released in 2025. Look, I understand these executive orders are meant that all the information is now made public, and that's really cool and all, and I appreciate this stuff. But if there was actually a piece of paper that said we shot this journalist, former agent, whatever, in the head, that would never see the light of day.
That's a really good point. I'm really glad he's taking the time to say this. CIA has been destroying its own evidence of criminal actions since its inception, since they were the OSS. Like, we know the CIA destroys evidence. When they were asked for evidence by the Senate Oversight and House Committees, fate is They had already destroyed a ton of information and had to be forcibly stopped. So it's important to remember that the smoking gun has already been destroyed, and all we have is the information floating around it. All we have is our ability to reconstruct everything that was happening at that time, and that requires all of these documents so that we can place everything in context.
I doubt anyone would even write that down to begin with. So I'm not saying they didn't do it. I'm just saying this memo isn't saying that they did it. Also, speaking of things that people are saying is in here that aren't really, I should probably mention the whole Israel thing. Now, there are some excerpts from the files that have been released that mention Israel. One of them is right here. So again, the JFK files are a compilation of any internal document that has anything to do with Kennedy. And this comes from an investigation that was happening in 1998. In 1998, the CIA was investigating this guy, and they had bugged his house in Cairo, Egypt. And in this transcript, we have a conversation between what I believe is a covert operative, or effectively an undercover agent, who is talking to the guy they're spying on. It says that the agent apologized for not phoning. Subject replied that the agent could call at his home anytime unannounced. He understood the agent's aversion to phones and added that Ethiopians tap diplomats' office and home phones, which is funny because he is talking to an undercover CIA agent. Yeah, those Ethiopians really like to spy on people. During conversation with agent, subject turned on tape player for sound masking and explained his home had not yet been tested for bugs. And then, this is so funny, in parentheses, the CIA typed, "A simple test is turn off all the appliances and check the electric meter. There's also a more sophisticated test." Perhaps it's the subject who was saying that, but the fact it's in parentheses, I choose to believe that the CIA in their own memos, like, if you wanted to find our bugs, you could just turn the lights off. Subject phones.
I'm almost positive that's exactly what they were doing. They're just acknowledging to themselves, yeah, we've got this limitation, but he didn't do this.
Spouse in Cairo and had agent speak with her. Subject gave agent 2 small gifts. Subject's brother-in-law is no good. He asked his father-in-law for money. Saudi attach weighty A. Saudi may be the Saudi intel officer in Addis, but subject is not yet sure. Israel is no good. Israel was behind the JFK assassination. Subject cheated on his wife only 3 times. And then he describes his affair and says the owner of Concord nightclub smuggles mercury, has good connections among Israelis and Ethiopian government. So this is a conversation with a guy that the CIA is spying on. The only reason it's included in these documents is because he mentions the JFK assassination. And this guy, in the midst of talking about how he doesn't like his brother-in-law and how
I just realized I didn't have captions on for him. I'm so sorry, guys.
he's only cheated on his wife 3 times. He says that he thinks Israel killed Kennedy. And again, this entire thing is just an internal document talking about spying on him. But people have been taking this screenshot and posting it around to say, oh, look, Israel killed Kennedy, just because this guy in Egypt says they did. There's actually another document about this dude. In another conversation with an undercover agent, it says agent raised the terrorist killing of U.S. diplomatic personnel in Karachi on the 8th of March to gauge Lashin's response. Lashin being the guy that they're talking to. Or at least I assume this is the same guy because it's in the same string of documents and seems to be in the same location at the same point in time. Everyone gets new names in each document you look at, so who knows. But anyway, the undercover agent raised this political point to see how Lashin would respond, and says, after launching into a homily about how the Prophet had called for mercy and decency by warriors in the treatment of civilians, Lashin went on to spin a series of typically paranoid Arab conspiracy theories. He suggested that the assassination of JFK and Anwar were somehow the work of the Israelis, who always sought to disrupt good relations between the US and Egypt. He suggested that the Israelis liked to play the fundamentalist card whenever pressures mounted on them to make concessions, and he argued that the Israeli Mossad had been behind terrorist attacks in Egypt as far back as the 1950s. So again,
Let's take a moment to step back and think about what we're actually hearing and reading here, because that's really important information. but it's also really important to put it into context. I'm really glad that Wendigoon is taking the time to speak about how this is requires this Egyptian conspiracy theory. This isn't the CIA admitting to anything. This is them talking about them gathering information and in getting what they considered a common Arab conspiracy theory of immediately blaming Israel. There are other documents that talk about Israel and the Israel intelligence services, but most of them have nothing to do with Oswald or JFK. Most of them have to do with trying to get a nuclear weapon. Israel really wanted a nuke at this time. They're trying to get a nuke at the exact same time that everyone else is trying to deal with the nuclear proliferation crisis. So it's going to come up in the docs. It's going to come up over and over that, oh, we came across Israel again, and they're trying to get nukes again. Oh, these guys are pissed at Israel because Mossad did this. Hey, but it's never evidence that Israel committed murder against one of our presidents. It's always evidence that Israel was doing intelligence work against us or against people that we were talking to. And if I'm being completely fair, we spy on everyone. If they're not spying on us, that's just a skill issue. I'm not saying I support what the CIA does. I'm not saying I support any of it, but it is what is. So if the CIA is doing it, and you're not doing it back, you're not playing the game well. What was that quote from the movie Hackers? Tap onto them as they tap onto us.
Both of those excerpts, if you see them out of context, are just this guy in Egypt speaking to an undercover agent about his opinions. Also, I'm just assuming the agent's undercover because this guy's talking about wiretaps and stuff like that. He could have known he was speaking to the CIA. I don't know. Again, all of this stuff is out of context because it's just thrown in if it relates to the JFK assassination. So I don't have the full story around who this dude was or anything like that, but I wouldn't exactly call him a credible source for information to say that Israel killed Kennedy. Another source that gets passed around about Israel's involvement comes from James Angleton. James Angleton was a
Oh. He's actually going into the James Angleton stuff. James Jesus Angleton is a weird figure. Very important in a lot of ways, not just in regards to the JFK assassination.
CIA agent who testified at a lot of the assassination hearings and things like that. And internally, they say he has numerous foreign sources and channels for developing information. The primary source is the Israeli intelligence service. It goes on after this to say that Angleton has independent sources in the intelligence services of France, Italy, Greece, and Great Britain, and on occasion he utilizes sources in the Vatican. So Angleton has people everywhere, but he primarily operates in Israel. I believe in other documents, or like in other information that's come out not in the JFK files, Angleton oversaw Russian influence within Israel, so he was undercover within Israel to see like if the Soviets moved people or weapons in and out. So after Angleton provides a lot of his information, again, this is pre-assassination, 1954, Angleton is notified that a lot of the information he's gathering is going to be shared with other government departments, and Angleton requests that they withhold all of his information concerning Israel. Because in 1954, Angleton was still an undercover agent within Israel and wanted that information kept very close to the chest. The memo says he further indicated that he desired the above method of designation in connection with correspondence dealing with Israeli intelligence matters. With regard to Bureau reports concerning Israeli matters, Angleton advised that such material is being retained under his personal supervision and control. It goes on to say he explained that he is involved in several sensitive projects such as Israeli intelligence, and if his identity were known to the other agencies, the security of CIA operations could be prejudiced. So then later in 1965, when information regarding Angleton
If his identity were known to other agencies, i.e., the Intelligence Service of Israel, MI5, or these other services in France or the Vatican, it could cause problems to the security of CIA operations that could be prejudiced. In other words, he was so interconnected with so many things going on at that moment that if his name came out, it would screw up a lot of the operations. James Jesus Angleton was involved in Gladio. Now, I've talked about Gladio before. This was the way that America basically ensured that we had of pro-Western soldiers hiding in the background, just in case there was a communist rise up. In Italy, we did the same thing in Brussels. We did the same thing in France. We did the same thing in Germany. I think we did them in a number of places in the Eastern Bloc, but they were much smaller. Hello, Maple, welcome. How are you? We're just going over some JFK docs. Talking about things I know about the CIA that aren't in this video. Like, um... a big problem that we're dealing with right now, like we're back in 1954. 1954 is the height of the CIA, trying to implement security forces, hidden security forces, across the world. So if this information came out that he was working with Israel, that could screw up work in Egypt. Now that you changed and used to work in settings, don't work like the actual else. The cat reporting is on the gross side of the cliches, before using the evidentness. That could screw up working in the Vatican, for heaven's sakes. And if it affects those connections, there could definitely be problems down the line for other secret projects. Nah, not that I mind. I am so happy to know all of this stuff, to get to know it better.
Could be prejudiced. So then later in 1965, when information regarding Angleton is being gathered, it says this information for the most part emanated from a liaison arrangement with CIA maintained with the Israeli Intelligence Service and from other sources under the control of Angleton. But a bunch of people are pulling this that says request for Israel information beyond to say that Israel had something to do with the assassination, which for one, it'd be crazy if they wrote that down. If like they knew that Israel killed Kennedy and they wrote down like Israel killed Kennedy, but mark out the Israel word. It's just Angleton saying he doesn't want his undercover operations made known to all government agencies. The only thing relating to Israel that actually has any meat to it is this one. So this memo is regarding a comment that was made to an ATF agent the day before the Kennedy assassination. After the Kennedy assassination, an ATF agent who was investigating arms deals down in Cuba and like southern Florida says that a man named Echeverria allegedly made a comment the day before the assassination of President John F. Kennedy that, quote, "We now have plenty of money. Our new backers are Jews. As soon as we or they take care of Kennedy, ... Now, this is one arms dealer in Cuba.
I didn't see this one. However, I will be honest with you. Thomas Mosley is a familiar name, and not one that I trust. Meow meow meow. Thank you for the Kemonomimi, Maple QB. What? Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. Some of my redeems are not enables. There we go. There's my ears. Thank you for the redeem. Anyway. So, this document is interesting, but it's also not confirmed. There's like no other cross-references that we can use to prove that this is real. And, it's just one of those offhanded comments. And it's not easy to confirm our new backers are Jews. In 1960, that could literally mean anything. That could mean a guy who lives in New York. It doesn't mean Jewish mafia. It doesn't mean Mossad. It doesn't mean Israeli intelligence. It just means that Jews are backing them. And that's what someone heard. It doesn't mean that that actually happens. Now, do I think that there is Jewish mafia money in this country? Absolutely. There's Jewish mafia money. There's Russian mafia money. There's various European mafias of various scale. Ireland still has a mafia here. Mob? Really? So, it doesn't surprise me that we would hear these rumors, but without additional evidence, I'm not just going to say, oh, it was the Jews. That's not the kind of person I am, Al. I want to know the person. I want to know what they ate for breakfast. I want to know what makes them tick. I want to know what makes the person writing this paper tick. I want to understand you. I want to see what makes you human, and I want to see what makes you purely inhuman. That's why I do all of this stuff. It's not the conspiracies. It's the people. This is a better soap opera than anything else I've ever watched. And you don't have to apologize, Maple.
Cuba, who said this offhandedly. I don't know how a Cuban arms dealer would know if Israel was planning to kill the president. But this was a comment that the CIA logged as suspicious, and we don't know if they looked into it or if the document is out there somewhere to elaborate. I couldn't find it. The main reason it was so hard to find this document is because this isn't from the JFK files. This is a file that was released years ago with the initial investigations into the assassinations. So this is old news, been out a really long time. But this is the one thing related to Israel that actually has some weight beyond what someone else said about their opinion regarding Israel. I understand a lot of people have issues with the Israeli government, especially right now. But regardless of how you feel about him, you have to understand when Kennedy was shot, the country had only existed for 15 years, which would be a crazy short amount of time to go from starting existing to shooting the president of the United States. Now, there are a couple of nations that were really afraid of getting mentioned in these reports, and they're not Israel. So in 1996, right before 97, when they signed and said,
oh crap. I just noticed what time it is, guys. I've got it. I can't run much longer. I'm going to have to start winding down for now, but we'll pick this up. We'll do this again soon. I don't want to say tomorrow and promise, and then not be able to do it, but I will try to do it tomorrow. Guys, thank you so much for showing up. It means the world to me that you were here with me for this. That you would show up and watch me do a little show like this. I actually been really paranoid about doing watch-along content because of the whole YouTube thing, the whole copyright thing. I'm not looking to steal anyone's content. I needed something I would want to watch with you guys. Something I want to do with you guys. Something to share. And then Wendigoon gave me something perfect. Watching this with you guys is great, and I'm going to have so much fun picking up the second half of the video. But for now, I do need to go. Oh, Wigs Incorporated. Oh. I'm so glad you were thinking about me. That means the worlds. But I do have to go. I will put up the VOD for this. I kind of don't want to keep VODs up and around too long. Because, like, none of this is real content yet. But if you like my content, please make. I need a minute in the bias on those must 2000s to pull on. Please, make clips and highlights. Show me what you think is awesome in my shows so that I can make better content. I think that would make the difference for me. It was good seeing all of you. I missed you too. I will try to make it back tomorrow, guys. I can't promise. Work is being insane. Bye. It really felt nice to spend a few hours with you guys. It's just, it was a lot easier using someone else's video as a foundation, instead of having to try and come up with 3 hours of content all by myself. This was easy because CIA shit, I just know. I has been, say, yeah, I've read through all of these things, every report, every news article I could get my hands on. And I want to share it with you guys. But for now, I really gotta go, because now the dogs are bothering me. Apparently, they didn't go to the bathroom when I asked them to. The woman also might have forgotten to eat, so gotta go take care of her. You guys take care too. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.